Have you ever noticed how narcissists can take a seemingly straightforward decision and turn it into an exhausting, nonsensical, circular argument? The constant conflict can mess with us and actually begin to make us think that we're the problem, that maybe we're the narcissist. Thank you for joining me today on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse. I'm your host, Dr. Carrie Kerr-McAvoy, a mental health specialist with over 20 years of counseling experience and a narcissistic abuse survivor. In this episode, we'll explore this common dynamic, including how to determine actually who's causing the problems. I'm thrilled you're here with me today. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and leave me a review and let me know what you think of the show. Finally, thank you for your donation to the listener-supported podcast. Together, we're shedding light on all things related to abuse. And with that, let's listen into this replay of a TikTok Live. Well, today we're going to talk about arguing with narcissists, why arguments with narcissists seem to never end well, and what we can do instead, how to handle it in a different way. So I want to first start with a preface of how I got to thinking about this. A colleague of mine was sent a video. This person videotaped his wife arguing with him, and he said, and by the way, I don't mean this gender specific. It could be the opposite. It's not necessarily about him being a man or her being a woman. It could have been a woman did this, and it would be about her husband. The genders aren't the point. I'm just setting up the situation. But he taped an argument that he's having with his wife, and he sent this video saying, doesn't it figure that narcissists always have to create problems on the holiday? So in other words, he was prefacing it as he was the good guy. He was the one trying to enjoy the holiday, and then sure enough, she had to make an issue of it. So it was a 2-part videotape, and I watched the whole thing. What I noticed was that the toxicity wasn't coming from her, it was coming from him. That he actually probably was the one who had more of a personality struggle. Maybe, I'm not saying he's a narcissist. I don't know. I don't know the guy, so I can't diagnose, but it was clear that his way of arguing was actually fueling the argument instead of resolving it. I'm trying to remember what the setup about the argument actually was. I think it was something like some issue about some plan. They were trying to finalize something, and he wouldn't finalize it with her. Instead, he blocked her, and everything that she brought up, he countered and made it her. So there was a lot of gaslighting going on. But he also then just attacked her style of talking and just sort of demolished it, accused her of being black and white, accused her of not knowing her own mind, accused her of always having to get upset, just did all this circular stuff. He essentially, and this what got me intrigued, I started to realize that I always thought of stonewalling is when you just sort of stand up and storm out. But I realized listening to this that you can stonewall verbally. You can actually just create sort of a psychological wall and say, I'm not going to talk about X, Y, Z, which is what he did. He wouldn't address the issue. He made her the issue. And so there was no resolution, except for she actually was quite calm throughout the whole thing. She just sort of at the end stood up and walked out. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about what happens with arguments. I think the first problem that happens, and I know this is not the first time I've said this, is that most of us go into a conflict, and I don't even want to use an argument. Let's just kind of say that there's a differing of opinion. Most of us go into a difference of opinion or even trying to work out details with something with the goal of finding a solution. And I know I've talked about this before with Darvo, where 2 people might be trying to figure out how to do carpooling or go to work. And but what happens is instead of the issue being the issue, it becomes not the issue. The relationship or the other person becomes the issue. So what are some common techniques that we've experienced when we do this? One obviously is Darvo, which is where you bring up the issue and then the person who is attacking you actually denies it, attacks you for bringing the issue up, and then victimizes themselves by saying you're hurting them by talking about the issue. I'm thinking of how my ex one time when I brought up something about related to his serial cheating, he's like, why do you always have to make me feel bad, make me feel so guilty? And I'm thinking, dude, because we have no closure on this. They flip the script and they become the one who's being hurt by you having the issue. So that's one thing that they do. But have you ever heard of narcissistic word salad? When I first heard this, what threw me as a psychologist is that this is a common symptom of schizophrenia. It's called word salad. And when you hear it with schizophrenia, they're actually two different things. But when you hear it with schizophrenia, it's just a bunch of gobbledygook words thrown together that have no meaning. They just are. Sometimes they like it because the words all start the same letter, like a consonant. It's called clanging. Well, they'll do like change chunked against the concrete wall that, they'll find like C's or CH's or whatever, or K's or J's. They'll find a certain sound and then they'll string the sound together because they like the way the sound sounds. And that's what's called word salad with a schizophrenic. But this is different. A narcissistic word salad is a circular argument. It's when they bring up an issue, and if you try to follow the string of thinking, there's no logicalness to it. They start at point A, and then they go to T, and then they come back to B, and they go to D. It just ends up being in this very circular fashion that has no beginning and has no end, and it just leaves you scratching your head. You walk out feeling dazed and confused. And that is the point of it. That's exactly the point of it. The point of it is to sort of obscure the issue by creating psychological confusion, and they're very good at doing that. So if they don't want to say, where were you last night? They will, instead of talking about where they were, they'll start in, our car's having problems, and why didn't you take it into the mechanic? And then I went and saw Paul, and he tried to help, and then we got lost over it. You're like, that's not, but the question was, where were you last night? Instead, you hear this lengthy story. And the goal of that, there's a goal to it. The goal of it is not only to confuse you, but also to exhaust you so that you stop asking questions because you don't want another 5-minute exposition that leads to nowhere because it's meaninglessness. So one thing that they'll do is they'll do word salad, narcissistic word salad. They'll also, here's another thing, and I want to tell you to watch out for something because they're going to use it against you. And this is a thing that a lot of women do more than men. Women use black and white language, like all or nothing language, not because we're necessarily literal thinkers or concrete thinkers. We do it really as a way, it's like emojis. So we just did a poll. Have you ever wondered if you were the narcissist? And 60% of you said, I've actually considered it. And 40% of you said, no, I've never thought of that. Very interesting. So women, one of the ways women talk as a way to emphasize something for intensity is we use words like all the time or it never happens. We use those. We use kind of abstract words, but men tend to think more concretely. They don't tend to think abstractly. So when they hear you say all the time or never or always, they hear literally you're saying as if every single time this issue's come up, this has been a problem. You're not actually saying that. You're just saying, I want to take this sentence and I want to bold it and highlight it and spotlight it so you know that I feel really upset about this. That's what we're saying. We're just saying if we could put emojis around it, we would, because or put it like all in caps. We want it all in caps. But because we can't, we use these intensity words as a way to increase the feeling of it. But what happens, especially with toxic people, they'll pick that up, that we're using an intensity word, and they'll then define it concretely, saying, and they'll make that the argument point. I don't do it all the time. You're wrong. I only did it 10 times out of the last 11 times or whatever. So watch out for that, because one of the things we fall into is trying to get our point across, and it doesn't work. So they'll use narcissistic word salad. They'll use literalness as a way to shut down the conversation. And then they'll gaslight. And I kind of already mentioned Darvo as one of the gaslighting techniques, but it doesn't have to be Darvo. Darvo is a specific form. It's when if you said that I'm not here for the kids, and then the person will respond, I never said that. They'll deny and then say, you always make this shit up. They'll attack you. And then you say that I'm not a good parent, and that's really offensive to me. So they'll flip the script, make themselves to be the victim, and you're the bad guy for bringing the issue up. But that's not the only form of gaslighting. It could be that they simply say you remembered it wrong, or that's not how it sounds to me, or they'll do something that suggests that the way you perceive it is incorrect, that you're being oversensitive, or that you're not remembering it right. And what that does is it often throws us and it erodes our sense of self-esteem and makes us feel very confused, which is the point. Again, it's a way of substituting your reality for their reality. I would love to know what other kinds of attacks you've experienced in these types of the arguments. I often have seen stonewalling where they just get up and walk out. Or in this example that I was sharing, this guy was using verbal stonewalling where he just refused to discuss the issue. But the big thing that really throws us is that we never get to a solution. In fact, what's happening is it's making you the problem, and then it is also as a way to avoid any solution by just creating upsetness and drama. And that's the point. The point isn't to find a solution. The point is just to be difficult. One of the other things that often happens is that they then accuse you and I of being the problem, that there was no problem until we brought the issue up, and that maybe we're the problem to begin with. And I would love to see how common that is. And that's why we ask the question, how often have you ever wondered that you're the narcissist? Because many of us walk away, end up thinking that we have the problem because we bring up a comment and then it ends up being problematic. Maybe we're making it up. Maybe we're the ones being difficult. I'd love to know if that's something you've ever actually struggled with, is wondering if you're the narcissist. What's interesting is this person who sent the video believes that they're the one who's being offended by their partner, when really actually the techniques this person was using was actually quite offensive and probably suggests that they're the one having the problem. Are you obsessively thinking about your past toxic relationship? Does your mind replay old arguments, relive painful memories, and struggle to resolve what was real and true about that relationship? Join a skill-building group coaching called Reclaiming Inner Peace and Confidence After Narcissistic Abuse. Relationship coach Trey De La Torre and I are going to bring our mental health expertise to help teach you how to stop the repetitive thinking cycle over the course of 6 separate sessions. This is a live online group experience. Find the clarity and peace you've been craving. The small group is filling up and space is limited, so be sure to lock in a spot for yourself today. The next session starts January 7th. Give yourself a gift and start the new year with a new you. To sign up, see the link in the show notes. So does the toxic people in your life know that they're toxic? Or do they think you're the toxic one? And how do you know who's the more toxic individual? Because one thing that happens is we start to become more toxic when we're around toxic people. We pick up sort of their bad habits. I remember doing some of that because I thought, I'll give him a taste of his own medicine. Maybe if he realized how awful this was, he'd stop doing it. And so then I started using some of his lines of arguments, not apologizing or kind of avoiding the issue, or I tried to I don't really want to lie, but I tried to skirt around the edges and throw some of it back in his face to see if maybe things got better. Now, it doesn't work. I suspect in your case it didn't work for you either. But it does really erode our sense of confidence in ourselves and make us wonder whether or not we're problematic because we're the ones who are having the problem. Here's a good test to ask yourself if you're struggling, wondering who's the more toxic in the relationship and wondering if maybe you're the toxic one. Ask yourself this question. Which of the two of you has a history of problems? Which of the two of you has a history of difficult relationships, loses relationships, everything seems to go wrong, and has a history of a lot of lost jobs or a lot of failed projects or failed goals? Like they say, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then it doesn't pan out. And I'm not talking about an ADHD tendency, because I know that can happen if ADHD just gets distracted and moves to something else. I'm talking about a person who creates, and this is what the best analogy I can think of, a person who creates sort of a cyclone of drama around them. There always seems to be something going wrong constantly. And it preceded the other person entering their life. See, that's the other key piece. It's historically been an issue. It isn't a new issue. It's a historical issue. You'll see this pattern of chaos and a pattern of drama and conflict and things just falling apart. I did a background check on my ex, and my big question really was something else. I was looking for a different answer. But one of the things that came back was his financial and legal history was challenging. There were lots of financial failures that showed up on the report, credit problems. There was lots of jobs that showed up for somebody his age shouldn't have had that many jobs. There were tons of apartment moves, like 14 to 15 different apartment moves. There was this pattern of like inconsistency and failing to kind of stay with something. You'll see that kind of a pattern with someone who's struggling with consistency and responsibility in their life. You're going to see this sort of just this chaos, too much change, too much chaos. That's a good sign that you've met somebody who's been having problems for a while and it circles around them. What the issue with personality disorders is that their condition, their disorder, their personality disorder doesn't cause them problems because it's who they are. It'd be like saying me having brown eyes is problematic. I'd say, well, they've always been brown. I don't even know what you're talking about. What would life be like with blue eyes? I've never had blue eyes. So they don't see it as they see it as inherently part of who they are. So therefore it's not an issue. But those around them just experience this swirling, constant uproar. I kept thinking when I was in that relationship with him that if we would get over this next difficulty, whatever it was, he was between jobs, or he didn't know what to do with himself, or he was bored, or he was struggling with an addiction, or whatever. I kept thinking if we solved that problem, that we'd get on kind of good footing and a good foundation, and life would quiet back down again. But it never did. It was just another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. And that's what you're going to find. If you experience that sort of like chronic upsetness, chronic disruption, that's a sign that you've met somebody who's doing something that's not leveling their life out. Because healthy people, because of their determination, their consistency, their good judgment, their good impulse control, their good observation of themselves and knowing themselves, they make decisions that lead to success. They keep jobs and they keep relationships, and they don't leave things to the last moment. So their cars don't fall apart, and they don't run out of gas on the highway, and they don't run out of money and then have no money to be able to buy lunch for the last week of whatever. You'll find this consistency because they're making good decisions, and it's the small decisions that lead to even better, bigger decisions. And toxic people don't do that because they're living spur of the moment. They're not insightful. They don't remember that in the past this didn't lead to a good spot, so they don't learn from past problems. And you'll just see this cycle of spinning and chaos and drama. So if you are in a relationship with someone who's problematic, who accuses you of being the problem simply for bringing up the problem, that doesn't make you the problem. It makes them the problem for having issues, for the inability to look at themselves. That's what the problem is. You know, I was thinking about when I started grad school and I moved to San Francisco Bay Area, and we didn't have a bank account, so we couldn't get an apartment. And then we had all these things kind of depended on each other. We just figured it out, got past it, and then life got better. But my ex, who was a narcissist, no, it just was like one issue after another issue. It just like, I just felt like we couldn't get out of the storm. Just was always, always, always problematic. Somebody says, sounds like privilege. So on Instagram, somebody said, maybe chronic bad decisions is just really a reflection of not having more privilege. I agree that privilege can be a problem. And it is hard as a white woman to say that I would know what not having privilege is like, since I've always had a level of privilege. So I know that I can't be entirely non-biased about this, but I also have seen people with privilege do the same thing, who have access to money, access to good education, access to, whatever resources those who don't have it wish they had, and they don't do any better with it. So when you control for the variable of privilege, it doesn't seem to make any difference. What we're talking about is a hardwiring personality tendencies that struggle with impulse control, self-reflection, good judgment, ability to delay impulses. That's something that is not related to privilege. It is something that's actually hardwired into your personality. And that's been shown by research. Research is bearing that out. So this is not, yes, those who don't have privilege certainly have an uphill battle. That is absolutely true. But we're talking about something a little different. What has been your biggest challenge when it comes to dealing with narcissist arguments and conflicts? Have you stopped to wonder if maybe the issue is you? Are you working to bring fewer issues up and trying to be more easygoing? Often, without us realizing it, we begin to make ourselves smaller and less obtrusive in order to reduce the amount of conflict. Are you getting support? It's important to be surrounded by others who understand what you're going through. Consider giving yourself a gift of joining my online community support group for just $5 a month. Chat with others who get it, and join our monthly video group chat. Become a member of Toxic Free Relationship Club by joining through the link in today's show notes. And thank you so much for joining me here today. I'll see you back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.